Hello everyone, it's Sage here and welcome to the Executive Corner Expert Talks 20 minutes roundup. And today we're very lucky to have Mr. Peter Bird, who is the Executive Chairman of Zenith Minerals. We bring you industry leaders, successful business owners, market and equity advocates all under one roof to help you discover the insights of the stock market and help you to understand how you can create multiple passive income streams. So, as I said in today's show, we're very lucky to have Mr. Peter Bird, who is the Executive Chairman of Zenith Minerals in Perth. And to give you some background, Mr. Bird, or Peter, is an experienced, well-known and highly respected mining industry executive. His extensive experience covers senior technical management, investor relations and human resources positions with many major mining companies such as Western Mining Corporation, Newmont and Normandy Mining. In addition, Peter has extensive expertise in equity markets, including 5 years at Merrill Lynch Equities. So welcome, Peter. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Hi, Sage, and thank you for having me on your program.
It's an absolute pleasure. So let's begin with the questions and let the audience in on some brilliant insights. So one of the major highlights of 2020 has been the sky-high prices of gold. However, since a few months ago, it is under consolidation. What are your anticipations on the long-term positions of gold, please?
Yeah, Sage, I think with respect to gold, we still live in quite an uncertain world, as we've all seen, both from a geopolitical point of view and also the shadow of the COVID pandemic. So my expectations in relation to gold is we are seeing a little bit of a period of consolidation, but if we look forward in the next 12 to 24 months, my sense is gold will either maintain its current pricing levels, which historically is at very high levels, or indeed if there's any bumps in the road, we could see an escalation. So we remain pretty optimistic about the gold sector in that time period.
Fantastic. Thank you for your insights there. So at the moment, your company, Zenith Minerals, is in a period of elevated activity, as it has been for several months now. How well is Zenith Minerals' strategy aligned with these anticipations?
Yeah, so no, thanks, Sage. I think Zenith's strategy is very clear. We've got a precious and base metals approach, and that's certainly shaping our portfolio. So we're currently actively evaluating, in our own right, 300% owned projects, 2 gold projects, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little later, and a base metal project called Devlin Creek. And then in addition, we have some joint venture interests, and one notable example is the 𝐊𝐴𝐴 lead zinc project with Rumble Resources. So I think that we're pretty well positioned. One, we're exposed to gold, and 2, if you look at the supply-demand fundamentals for base metals, in particular copper, they're very strong. So I think we're in a nice position.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing that information. So Zenith Minerals has expedited progress across its key projects, including Split Rocks Gold Project and Red Mountain Gold Project. More recently, our viewers must be eager to learn about the company's current engagements. Would you be able to give us a bit of insight on that, please?
Yeah, sure. So they're 2 quite different projects, as I said a little earlier, both 100% owned. Split Rocks is located near the town of Southern Cross in Western Australia, and we've been actively doing exploration, mainly in the form of drilling, since the early part of last calendar year, with some progressively encouraging results, to the point where our clear objective there is to see whether or not we can't find commercial amounts of gold for subsequent exploitation. So it's what you call a large volume, lower grade, but relatively easy surface mining opportunity. If we look at Split Rocks, it's located in, look at Red Mountain, it's located in Queensland. Quite different. It's a higher grade proposition. Also been drilling that since the early part of last calendar year. We're continuing to drill that, and even this week we've released some pretty strong and positive drill results from there. So in both cases, we'll be drilling these projects for the remainder, I would have thought, of this calendar year. with the objective of defining, commercial volumes of gold.
Fantastic, and congratulations on that big news from Red Mountain. It seems that you're getting through the drilling quite quickly there and finding the intersections to be much shallower than expected, I believe. Can you give us a snapshot about what kind of resource potential we're looking across these projects, and what are the plans for 2021?
Yeah, so the plans for 21 on all three of our 100% owned projects, so that's Split Rocks Gold, Red Mountain Gold, and Devlin Creek, which is the base metal copper project, is really actively drilling holes in the ground to try and get commercial scale metal inventory, whether that be gold inventory or copper, or as I said earlier, with our joint venture at 𝐊𝐴 lead zinc. So really what we're looking for, the answer to your question, it's a little bit hard to be specific about the actual resource size, but the objective is very much to define a resource at 1, 2, or even 3 of these projects during this calendar year. So there'll be a lot of news flow for the remainder of this calendar year.
Excellent. We'll definitely be looking out for it. Zenith Minerals is also accelerating exploration efforts at its 100% Australian-owned copper projects in Queensland, Devlin Creek and Flanagan's. Please elucidate on the pipeline of activities in this space.
Yeah, so Devlin Creek, for the sort of less informed, is what they call a VMS, volcanogenic massive sulfide system. But I think the message to leave the listeners here is that these systems tend to be higher grade than the big porphyries around the world, and they tend to occur in swarms or pods. So we've already defined over our 50 kilometre lease package a number of quite clear pods or targets which we're evaluating. There's a pre-existing resource on the property, and really our principal focus this year is to get in there and drill pretty aggressively for the remainder of this year, and as I touched upon a little earlier, to try and define commercial size resource. The neat thing about these projects is that they are quite high grade and therefore valuable. So if we can crack the nut, as they say, it'll be a very high value project for the company.
Very exciting news there. I hope it goes well for you. How well is Zenith Minerals funded to pursue the upcoming exploration works that you mentioned?
Yeah, so we raised some money in the second half of last calendar year, which allowed us to put together a pretty detailed budget and activities for this current calendar year. So the activities we've got planned on those 3 key projects for this year will be quite well funded into the third quarter of this calendar year, which will allow us to execute all the things I've been touching upon earlier in this interview.
Okay, great. Thanks for that insight. We cannot ignore the fact that the uncertainty surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic is still persisting. It's still there, even though maybe not as strong. Keeping this in mind, what could be the possible short-term as well as long-term challenges for Zenith in its journey ahead, and how well is ZNC prepared for them?
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Sage. I mean, it being COVID, it has cast a very long shadow over the world, as we all know. In our case, I suppose we have a couple of things in our favour. The projects that we're actively evaluating in our own right are located within Australia, so we're not overly restricted, at least on a state-by-state basis, for executing the activities that we want to undertake. I think that's the first point. The second point is we're doing that, like all businesses, in a very COVID-safe manner, and we've put in place all of our protocols and policies and procedures to align with that. So to that end, those are 2 things that we can control, and we can control that really well. But it'd be remiss of me not to say that there is some disruption sometimes to your execution If there's a COVID scare in a particular state or region, even if it doesn't directly affect what we're doing day to day, it may affect our supply chain. And one of the things that certainly has been affected in the resources, well, two things. The first thing in the resources industry is the ability to get your samples assayed in a timely manner, because the laboratories may be impacted by COVID. And the second thing is the ability to move, despite what I've said about Australia being we've got good policies and procedures, the ability to move people around in the country as we know, been a little bit restricted. So at the end of the day, what does it mean? It means it tends to slow things down a little bit, but it's not unique to our company. I think it's, all of the people in the industry, the mining industry, are impacted by that, but we're doing a pretty good job, I think, of progressing or wading through the issues. From my personal perspective, I think the quicker as a country we can get our vaccinations done and take some of the risk out of it for all people will allow us to get on and do what we want to do. So I think that's the answer to it.
Exactly, and I absolutely agree with you that it's across the board. If your company's affected by supply chains due to COVID, almost every other company may be affected in the same way. Yes, I understand what you're saying. On to the next question. In the last year, ZMC stock has performed exceptionally well with staggering growth in share price. What is Zenith Minerals' plan of action to create further value for its shareholders, please?
Yeah, well, that's always the question, isn't it? But I think what we've done in the past 12 months is quite clear. We've got a very clearly defined strategy about progressing our portfolio in the precious and base metal space, and we've been quite strident about that. That's the first point. The second point is that our wholly owned assets, we have been progressing them with basically elevating activity levels and getting good results or positive news. And Sage, that's the reason I think that we've had quite a positive response in our share price. So just for listeners, in about April of last calendar year, we were trading at sort of 3.5 to 4.5 cents per share, and the stock's now trading pretty comfortably in that 12 to 13 cents per share range, and that's a direct response to that work. So the short answer is we're pretty systematic in what we do. We'll keep undertaking the activity levels on all of our sites, and what we can control is generating good data and hopefully, as I said at the start of the interview, defining more metal inventory, and then it's up to the shareholders and the market to value that. But I think we're already seeing a positive impact. So we'll keep progressing those activity levels.
Fantastic. Thank you again for sharing that. So having the historical data to help at some of your sites, as well as the high grade results that you're achieving, are really having a huge impact, as we can see from the percentage increase of your share price that you mentioned there from April to the present. Amazing. Where does Zenith Minerals currently stand while being in pursuit of its vision to build a gold and base metals discovery business?
Yeah, so Sage, that's a very interesting question. So I joined the company in the early part of last calendar year, and I think the thing that attracted me to the business is the technical team within Zenith have been exceptional in aggregating a very strong portfolio of assets, which we've been talking about today. It is often the case for smaller, or what they call micro-cap companies, to have sort of one quite reasonable asset and really that's it. Zenith is a bit unusual. It's got at least three that it owns in its own right, that it's progressing in parallel at the minute. And then, as I touched on a little earlier, there's things like the 𝐊𝐴𝐴 lead zinc joint venture with Rumble Resources, which is also progressing. So what's a bit unusual about the company, getting to your question, is that I think each one of those assets is at an inflection point where they're moving from an exploration project with some potential to projects that are going to get aggressively drilled in a more systematic manner with the objective of generating resources. So I think it's very much watch this space for the rest of this calendar year, but I think we're very optimistic that we'll have success. And as they say, it's better to have 3 or 4 horses running than just one, because the probability of success rises and your risk falls.
Absolutely, spot on there. The same with portfolios. Having a diversification in your portfolio can help to keep it afloat. Exactly. Well, we've actually reached the end of our questionnaire. Was there anything you'd like to add, any closing words for our investors?
Yeah, so Sage, I think, just to close off, I think Zenith is a little bit of a unique company in that it's one, got a very strong technical team. 2, they've aggregated a very strong portfolio, which should lead to 3, generating value for shareholders. So that makes us somewhat unique. It's not a well-known story. One of the positives of the technical team is they're incredibly conservative. And I suppose it's part of my role to sort of illustrate their success, which they're very humble about doing. But I would say to people, watch this space and put Zenith on your watch list.
Thank you so much for chatting to us today. I can really feel your passion for your projects, and best of luck with your future plans as well, and then over the next year or so.
Yeah, thank you, Sage.
So that was a fabulous show. It was absolutely lovely chatting to Mr. Peter Bird, who is the Executive Chairman of Zenith Minerals. And with that, Sage signing off today. Watch this space for more. Until then, stay apprised and invest wise with Kalkine.